So welcome to another Simplicity of Logic. So today we're talking about to avoid using superlatives and hyperbole in everyday life. Now, superlatives is the highest degree or something. For example, I am the best. Or hyperbole being something even more of an exaggeration. Like, I'm so hungry I can eat a horse. You know, it usually ranges to the level of almost impossible. And these always include these several words such as never, always, for sure, and so on. And I say that people should actually use less of that in everyday discussions, especially because they tend to lead you to forget reason and also to a certain extent logic. Now, this is not to say that you shouldn't use it in everyday life, but if I feel that people do discuss better in debates and come to better conclusions where they use it less. But before that, let's first go into the counter arguments against my point. Now, the first counterpoint is it is kind of impractical. And to a certain extent, I do agree with it somewhat. Because when you stop using these terms like always, never, and everything, you can't exactly say anything very fast. And on top of that, you start caveating a lot when you give reasons. Example, if someone was to ask you, do you like the Avengers? You would say things like, you can't just exactly say, like, I like it. Or I love it. You say like, I like it, but as this kind of movie, you see, you have to keep giving reasons, which is what caveating is. And I actually learned this from studying philosophy and history, which was my degree. And just to go back on that point, I did many years finance course, and before I switched to philosophy and history degree and completed that. And when I was doing finance, when you do an essay, usually you're only finding evidence that supports your point of view. And that was usually it. Whereas when I transferred from philosophy to philosophy and history, what happened was, they would say your essay is okay, but you need to give the counterpoints, meaning you have to address the counter arguments. Alright, and on top of that, reading books from like the big philosophers, such as especially the more older ones like Kant and Descartes and everything, you will find their original text almost impossible to read because they caveat everything, such as they would write something along the lines of in terms of the freedoms of man being a creature of the, they would keep caveating. So unless you really understand the topic, it makes it a very hard. You're not going to understand the full point by reading it one time through for most people. Alright? But at the same time, it's because of all those little caveats, all those little extra reasons that make it so clear when you do understand it, that makes the point so focused and gets their point across as they really want it to be implemented in government and so on. But as you can see, the downside of that is, in a quick conversation format or in everyday conversation, it's kind of hard to get used to, because you're not going to have a quick conversation anytime soon. On top of that, you'll keep giving reasons, and sometimes, especially in the early parts of practicing all this, you would tend to drone on a bit because you will feel like you need to get across your points exactly, which is really hard. The second counterpoint is the placebo effect. Now, some people would say that if you use the placebo effect by saying something along the lines of, I'm going to be the best person I can be and all that, that it can lead you in a good way to do better things for yourself, to improve yourself. And, if the goal is well chosen, I agree, but at the same time, I do not think it's the best reason, of which I will explain later why. But I can agree that it is a possibility, but I feel it's heavily flawed. The third point is along the lines of how people, for example, will always, on a cursory reading of Nietzsche, for example, they will say that it makes you, in terms of not using hyperbole and superlatives, it makes you a very pessimistic person. As when you're talking, usually, like I say, you can't say anything fast, and usually there's a lot of use, especially at the start when you start practicing this. You use a lot of buts. You say like, that was a great cake, but because like I said, you have to start caveating a lot, and that does make you sound very much pessimistic. But as you go on, you will start to learn, at least if you're trying to use language that cuts out the buts but still gets your point across. But I agree, it does make you sound a bit more pessimistic, and maybe to a certain extent it might also make you pessimistic, but that really depends on you. The last point would be that you can't start anything fast, because if you stop to every time think that you're supposed to use superlatives, you don't want to be affected by hyperbole. What happens is that you have to keep stopping to think and think and think, and some people might take it so far that they never are able to start anything. They're kind of frozen by the situation, that you don't want to be affected by some outside views that are wrong, or even your own views that might be biased. Can't deny that it's true, but I feel that this would probably affect less people than the mass majority, but I can't deny that it's a possibility. So with that, let's go into the pro arguments that I support. The first pro argument point of mine that I like to talk about is touching on the placebo effect issue. And I agree that the placebo effect, if put to a good goal, can be good for you, but at the same time it can also be directed at bad goals. And on top of that, that is compounded by the issue that if you like to use language or superlatives like I'm the best or I'm going to be the best, that kind of thing, it can lead you towards negative things. And because you keep using that kind of language, it doesn't really allow for thought. What happens is you might be driven towards that goal, all the while not even able to hear good advice when it comes to you, because you keep saying I'm the best, and someone will say something, you're like, they're trying to pull me down, but I'm so focused, I'm gonna get there, because like I said, you never double checking your points when you use language like I'm the best, because most people, when they say they're the best at something, they're probably not. There's 7 billion people in the world. So that's my first issue with the placebo effect. The second pro point I would like to put out is that you'll find that your points that you make are harder to tear down. To give you an example, let's say you and a group of people are eating cake, and if a person says that something along the lines of, that's the worst cake ever, alright, now we all know that's usually not true. In fact, you can easily say, well, that's not true, because what if a cake was made of mud? Do you think it'd be worse than the cake you just ate? Compare that to if you don't use hyperbole or superlatives and you say something along the lines of, that's the worst cake I've eaten in the last 3 weeks, and in those 3 weeks I've eaten 3 cakes. Now between two, I think you easily see one of them is so much harder to tear down, and that's only because you stopped using those kind of language that in a factual sense is usually never true. The third point is on top of what I just said, is you find that you've made yourself a much more sincere person, because like I said, you're not taking things for granted anymore. You're not using lines that are never true. In fact, usually what happens is you have to keep backing up your point. And it also has the compound effect, or checks and balances on your behavior. To give a real life example, when I used to watch people cross the road illegally, and what happens is that, in Singapore, sometimes people cross illegally, they don't even wait 2 minutes for a light to go green, and they almost cause an accident. And I used to say always how stupid they are and everything. Then one day when I stopped to think about it, I was thinking, well, you know what, I too crossed the road illegally. Even if it's at 4 AM and there's no cars or whatever, it's still doing that same act, so it's a hypocrisy. So what happens is that nowadays, and to use my own advice, I can't say that I've stopped 100%, but I have cut down my crossing of the roads illegally by a significant amount. So like I say, it makes you a better person, and not to be a hypocrite and everything. And also, you don't start to take points for granted, because like I say, you always stop to give reasons or want to give reasons. Alright, example, also you start to, when you search for evidence, you look for stuff that's much more credited. To give an example of this, and I was one time discussing with someone about the foreigners in the country, and he's not very supportive of it. He's like, they're taking our jobs and all of that kind of thing. And I told him, like, what's your evidence? And he was also talking about how their behavior in the country is very bad and all. And his evidence was basically like, if you go out and take a bus, you would know. Of which I was like, that's very personal. Have you met every one of them in Singapore? He's like, no. And I was like, how can you say that? And he's like, oh, you know what, I just know. I know it's true. And if you go out, you just know. You see what I mean? On top of that, for me, if let's say you threw that at me, alright, if I had that, for me, I won't just go up to the internet and find the first article I find. I'll go look for the journals from a credited source rather than anything on the internet, which people like that tend to do, which is they pick the first piece of evidence from even. There was even one time there was a guy who picked a article from a joke website and put it up thinking it was real, not even checking the evidence of whether this article was real, because it was really outlandish, you know. So, you know, when you stop using superlatives and hyperbole, your brain starts working in a different way, whereby you tend to take time to stop and think whether the evidence is real, because you, like I said, you start caveating and wanting to make sure that your points come across correctly. And on a side note, if I might digress, I learned all this in university from philosophy and history. So if you take the lessons in philosophy and history well and as learning, I do believe it makes you a better person. So financially it's not the most profitable, I agree, but can't deny, I think if the lessons are taken well, they do improve you as a person. So in conclusion, try to stop using words like never, for sure. Basically stop using superlatives all the time. Not to say that you should never use them, but try to cut down on it. And also to stop using hyperbole also, which is the over exaggeration of everything. Alright, and to just always back up your points with as much good evidence, I repeat the word good evidence, as possible. So thank you very much. Till next word.